Hey, what's going on, internet? Long time no see. In today's video, we're going to be taking a detailed look at the crafting system in New World, more specifically the armoring skill. Now, I apologize for this video taking a while. I may or may not have been a little bit too perfectionistic, but I could wait no longer because, as you guys know, those of you that watch my other content, I like to do my due diligence when it comes to proper research and sort of knowing what I'm talking about before talking about it. And as part of the research process, I do like to, check out a couple of other guides as well, see what other people have been talking about. And I'm not going to mention the name, but let's just say there's no shortage of horrible armoring guides out there. Like, I'm sure they all mean well, and it's not that everything they're saying is wrong, but fundamentally it's like a bunch of them just haven't run the numbers. So it's my goal in today's video to give you guys a proper understanding of how you want to level a skill such as armoring. And the same thing goes, like the same principles will apply to a lot of the other crafting professions. So it's not just going to be about armoring, but we are going to be focusing on armoring since that's the first real skill that I leveled up. And with that said, yeah, let's get to it. First things first, in New World, the crafting system allows you a little bit of variety. There are different types of recipes. First of all, we have sort of the varying recipes, like the light meal, for example. Now, the light meal requires exactly a tier 3 food to be put into the top. Not a tier 2, not a tier 4, a tier 3. It has to be a tier 3. It is locked in for this specific recipe. Then you have two other categories where you can put in everything from tier 1 to 5, which will affect your chance to craft additional items. Now, obviously you don't cook armor in the kitchen or something. That's in the armory, right? And in the armory, increasing, sort of putting in higher tier materials would instead yield a higher gear score instead of extra outputs, more meals. Now, that's a fundamental principle that I think most of you will understand already. But let's get to the outfitting station. Now, I've done the numbers, and really there are only, as far as leveling goes, there are only 8 different items separated into 2 different categories and 4 different skill levels that you're going to be crafting for XP. That doesn't mean you can't craft other stuff on the way there, but as far as just pure XP grind for getting 200 armoring, there are only 8 different items that you're going to be making. We're going to stick exclusively to these 8 items. So what are these 8 items? Well, linen hand wraps. That is the first item, linen hand wraps. Now, all of these 8 items are gloves, and there's a reason for that. So the reason you want to be crafting gloves as opposed to linen shoes or linen hats doesn't really matter that much for the first 50 levels, but it will matter a lot for all of the coming levels. And the reason is it has the lowest ratio between primary materials and secondary materials. Right, as you can see, it has a 1-to-1 ratio here for linen, 4 coarse leather, 1 iron ingot, whereas all of the other ones have 5-to-3, 10-to-6, 11-to-6, and so it is the single most resource efficient thing to craft because, again, the primary material is going to be fixed at a set tier, so you have to refine that part up, whereas the secondary can simply be the lowest grade material you have. Although I don't believe it can go lower than tier 2. So linen hand wraps and coarse leather gloves. These are the 2 first items that you're going to be making. Coarse leather gloves and linen hand wraps. These are the 2 you're going to be using all the way up to level 50. Once you reach 50 in armoring, you're going to hop up a tier. Now, I know some people are claiming that you want to keep crafting the lower tiers, but that simply is not true, and I will show you why with a bit of math once we've gone through all of the items, right? So you go from linen hand wraps, coarse leather gloves, and then at 50 you move up, you're going to unlock sateen gloves. And so you're going to start to craft sateen gloves and still make sure in between each craft that you reset the resources to the lowest tier, because otherwise what it will do, if I were to click craft here, on the next roll it would actually set all of these materials to tier 3 materials if I had them. So make sure you put them back to the lowest tier. So sateen gloves and rugged leather gloves. These are the next 2 tiers. You're going to be crafting these all the way to 100 in armoring. Now, once you've crafted a bunch of rugged leather gloves, I believe the number is going to be on the screen, but I believe it was 349. I really hope that's the right number. Anyways, after that, we're going to be moving up to the next tier, which is layered leather gloves, of which you'll need to craft 599, if my memory serves me correctly. Layered leather gloves and silk gloves. Again, always making sure that you set these materials to the lowest possible. I recall one time where I accidentally spent 51 star metal ingots because I wasn't watching, and that's an expensive mistake since you're going to be salvaging all of the items anyways, or most of them at least, but we'll get into that momentarily as well. So from 100 to 150, silk gloves and layered leather gloves. And then we get to 150 and the final stage. Now you might be thinking, once you reach 150, wow, I'm almost at 200. I'm so close. But no, you're not. So XP wise, you're halfway there at 173. Okay, so you've gained half the required XP to 200 at 173. The last level from 199 to 200 takes the equivalent XP of going from 1 to 73. Okay, so I wouldn't say you're almost there until you're above 195. But anyways, for the final 50 levels, you're going to be crafting infused leather gloves, and you're going to be crafting infused silk gloves. And of course, again, making sure always to use the lowest equivalent tier. Now, these you will need to craft 989 of combined from 150 to 200. 989. Right? So some basic math will dictate multiply by 4, and you can sort of work out, roughly speaking, how much infused silk / leather you will need. But, if we were to pool all these numbers together, right, and let's just say that we were only doing the silk as the primary, just as a thought experiment, hypothetically speaking, or theoretically speaking, you would need 320,000 fiber. Thankfully, you don't actually need 320,000 fiber, but if you didn't proc any extra materials as you were refining, so on and so forth, then in theory, if you were to just scroll here and like wanted to click craft from 0 to 200, then it would require 320,000 fiber, if nothing procced. Right, that's a lot of fiber. Which brings me to the reason why it's worth it to actually increase the tiers every 50 levels. So, of course, it's every 50 levels that you unlock the next tier. But why is it actually better, right? Because some people might argue that. Let's say here, look at the infused silk gloves. It gives 1,395 XP, whereas the silk gloves gives 675. So someone might argue that, oh, that's only like double the XP, right? And you need to take 4 pieces of silk and combine it with 8 wire weave just to craft it to the next tier for double the XP. That doesn't seem worth it when all of the other materials are the lowest tier. But here's the thing, and this is why it's so important that you purchase Accumulation Gear. Let's do a little bit of, I apologize, but math. Now, if I were you, I would focus on leather as your primary most of the time, and linen some of the time. But it's easier to grind a fuck ton, a metric fuck ton, in fact, of leather than it is to grind a metric fuck ton of linen, because it's less contested during like peak hours. Okay, let's see here. 20% chance to craft additional items, right? But I don't have my accumulation gear on right now, so let me just go and grab that. I just went and switched to my leather accumulation gear. Now, leatherworking is the cheapest of all the accumulation sets. I believe you can purchase a full set of leatherworking accumulation gear for, I'd say, if you're unlucky, 500 gold. At least on my server, it's a big server, so maybe I was lucky, but usually these sell for like sometimes all the way down to 50 gold a piece, and maybe the most expensive one will be like 250. But for 500 gold, this is the best investment you're ever gonna make. Now, first things first, you might be thinking 10%, right? 2%, 2. That doesn't sound like a lot at first glance, right? 10%, doesn't really seem like it's going to make that big of a difference when we hypothetically need 320,000 fiber. But it actually makes a world of difference, and here's why. In the beginning, the difference will be small, right? Because here we're going to go from 20% to 30%. We go from 20 to 30, right? So let's just imagine 100, just as an easy number. It doesn't matter what it is, just imagine 100, right? 100 as an output would be 120 because of our chance to craft additional items, which would be 130 now because of our accumulation gear. Okay, 10%. But then we have the next step. And on the next step, again, depending on which tenon you're using, we still add, just from the gear, another 10%. But now we're also adding 10% of the former 10%, which means it's actually 21%, right? But it's actually 21% potentially also of this 93%, which is what it would be at if I wasn't using H10, right? So because of that accumulation, the number increases, but it's already 10% of 10%, so that's 21%. 10% of the 21%, so that's going to be 33%, and 10% on the infused leather, that's actually 46.5% increase. So you're almost taking all of the stuff you have, you cut it in half, that's what you get extra, just for having the accumulation gear. But it's actually better than that. It's actually more than that, because when you take into account, let's just say we're using H10 on every row. Let's just say that, right? Still going to be 30 on the first. It's going to be 103 on the next. It's going to be 50 on the next. And it's going to be 23 on the next. When you combine, and the reason we're not doing runic leather is because it's a little bit of a different side story. And as far as crafting, leveling, you're only going to go to infused leather. When you combine all of these, right, you get a total 487% in yield. That means where before you would have had an output of 100 infused leather, now combining H10 with leatherworking accumulation gear, we're now talking 487 pieces instead. Now, of course, the value of the accumulation gear is going to be slightly less. It's going to be 10% for the iron hide only, and it's going to be 21% in terms of how much thick hide you need. But again, going to be 46.5 compared to how much raw hide you need to use. And when you stack all of these together, then suddenly the numbers are manageable. Suddenly it's not, you don't have to grind forever just to get all of this leather. 100 plus 30% plus 103% plus 50% plus 23% plus 37.5%. Look at that value. We actually obtained over 6 times, almost 6.7 times the value per piece of rawhide at the final refining stage, right? Now, the reason it goes this high is because of all the accumulating percentage factors. The final factor, the 37.5%, that is the salvage process, right? You put in 4 infused leathers, and when you salvage it, you get 1 to 2 back, right? So that's a 1.5. Like half the time it's going to be half you get back, half the time it's going to be a quarter that you get back. So 37.5% is the average value of a salvage, in this case, of the primary resource. And so if we only look at the rawhide, we've actually taken the rawhide and made it 6.69.5 times more valuable, right? The rawhide specifically. Now, I watched the guide, right? Dude, I'm sure he meant well, right? He had a good ground concept in that he was talking about this amazing spot for level 60s up here where you can farm boars, right? It's a great place. If you have a bunch of skinning gear on, this is a great place to farm and skin and essentially get smolder hide and scar hide. Now, smolder hide and scar hide are 2 of the sort of semi-legendary materials. They are technically legendary, but that you need to make runic leather. And he was suggesting that he went and farmed a bunch of scar hide, a bunch of smolder hide, and he put that in when crafting instead of putting in the infused silk or infused leather, right? So to level up, he suggested, and this video had like over 50,000 views, and only positive likes and comments, right? And again, I didn't say anything because I don't want to be that guy, but please don't do that. That's a very bad idea. Let me explain why, okay? Sure, you could substitute the cloth up here for blister weave, or you could also substitute the infused leather gloves here for either scar hide or smolder hide, and you might be thinking that's a good idea because then you don't have to bother going through all of the refining processes. But here's the thing, you could go to the auction house, right? And then instead you could sell all your smolder hide and all your scar hide, right? And then you could purchase back your infused leather 8 times over. See why that's a problem? And I'm putting in low estimates right now for the value of infused leather in relationship to scar hide or smolder hide. It is roughly speaking 8 times as valuable, which means you could instead just sell all of it, and then you could purchase 8 times as much infused leather back, and then you could have leveled up way faster, way more efficiently. But in any case, if I were you, I would still keep my smolder hide and scar hide for making runic leather, because that's where the real profit is as far as leather goes. But in terms of actually leveling up your skill, there are a couple of tricks you can use, both for the grind, but also when you come back from the grind. Now this is a mistake that I made on several occasions. I'd go and I'd farm roughly 7,000 rawhide and 7,000 fiber. Right? Then I'd go and I'd start the refining process, and then I would refine all of my fibers, or all of my linen, sorry, and all of my leather. That's a mistake. When you come back to the town, right, you should only, you can refine all of it to linen and all of it to coarse leather. But step 2, you should only refine 3/4. And then you can refine all of it to the highest tier that you need for the crafting, right? But you never refine, only just keep it as a rule. Refine 3/4, right, from tier 2 to tier 3, so that you have that base resource ready as an input when you're actually doing the crafting. Because otherwise you're going to end up in a situation where you have plenty of like high tier grade A infused leather and infused silk, but then you realize, oh shit, now you have to put both of them in, or maybe you'll end up having to put in layered leather, or more valuable materials than just having to put in coarse leather as the secondary or linen as the secondary, right? So always just, it's a good rule, 3/4 you can refine up, keep the final quarters as either linen or coarse leather. Now, so that is the most efficient way to farm it up. It's still going to cost you quite a bit of money in crafting fees, make no mistake. As far as the actual farming, leather, cutlass keys. Now, cutlass keys is just one big metric fuck ton of leather. Okay, that's what it is. There's leather everywhere here. Usually I'll teleport down here, I'll start killing all these crocs, I'll go up, I'll take out some of the pumas and the boars here. You just follow the coast. There's a major crocodile hub here with like 10-15 crocodiles. There's another major crocodile hub right here with 3 or 4 chests as well. Here, and I believe also down here, you have hounds, which with an insanely fast respawn rate, especially here, like these hellhounds, and they give like 60 rawhide a piece or something, and they respawn insanely fast. You can aggro like a bunch of them at once and do one big AoE. Of course, you just have boars and pumas scattered all over this area in general, and you have crocodiles just all along the coast with the exception of a few minor places, right? So this is like just the best place, even up here, filled with crocodiles. So much coarse leather here. This is the only place you need for coarse leather. I know there are other spots as well. There's a good spot up here, for example. It's a great spot for farming rawhide. And of course the way leather works, for those of you that don't know, is any minion between level 0 and level 40 drops rawhide. From 40 to 50 it will generally drop thick hide, and from 50 to 60 it will generally drop iron hide, with a few noticeable exceptions. For example, there's a cave that is alright for farming up here in Great Cleave right there, where in about the time it takes you to kill all the wolves and skin them, they will all respawn. And here you'll get a ratio of 2 iron hide for 1 thick hide, right? You can actually find both thick hide and iron hide here, but of course that's another thing you want to think. You want to think about the ratios when you're actually farming these materials, and thankfully the numbers are identical. Like you can translate 1-to-1 iron hide for wire fiber, and thick hide for silk, right? So the ratios are identical, which is just neat to know, because that way you don't need to, think so much about it. It's the exact same ratios. And if you think about it logically here, and this is really important so that you come back with roughly the right amount of materials, so you don't end up having to store 2,000 iron hide that you aren't going to be able to use for the next 3 days, and your storage is just flowing over and it's super annoying, right? So for that reason, I would suggest that you always keep this ratio in mind. Think about it, right? So for 2 sateen and 6 silk threads, you get 1 piece of silk, right? But you need 2 silk for 8 wire fiber. That means 6 multiplied by 2, right? That's 12 silk threads for every 8 wire fiber, right? So that's a 2 to 3 relationship. So every time you have 3,000 silk, you want to have 2,000 wire fiber. And the same would be true for leather. Every time you have 2,000 iron hide, you want to have 3,000 thick hide. And of course, it doesn't really matter how much of the base resource you have, just max that out as much as possible. You can always refine that a little bit later. It's not as heavy, and it's not unrefinable. That's the problem. If you don't have the right ratios, you're going to have to store the very heavy hide or threads. And for that reason, it's more important that you actually have the correct ratio. And with these tricks, you should be able to get to armoring in no time. Now, as far as silk goes, obviously, if you're on a low population server, Windsward, but you're most likely not. So generally, this is my favorite place. You should be seeing a little bit of a cutout on the right side here. That's usually the route I prefer to take. You have so much wire fiber here, a couple of wire fiber hubs, right? You have silk all over here. You have a bunch of just fiber all the way down here, along the side here. And there's almost no people here. Like, there are people farming up and down here, but this area here, there are very few quests. There's very little reason to go there except for the fiber. So if you can find a good timing, that's usually worth it. Because unlike with Rawhide, it's minions. Minions keep respawning. They don't get contested in the same way. I mean, I know once in a while you get to a spot, someone just cleared one of the good spots, but it respawns so quickly. I feel like with Rawhide, there's always somewhere to go. It's almost like trees, right? It's not like there will be trees. No matter how many trees someone cuts down, you're not going to end up in a situation where, like, God damn it, there are no trees left, right? Whereas with linen, or iron, probably more iron than with linen, but nonetheless, with linen even, it's about finding a timing, right? That's super important. This is a general tip for really any farm, whether it's iron or anything else. If you find that the area you're going to farm, if every time you go from, one piece to the next, and you only to find it being gone, right? You're like, oh, that one's not there, that node's not there, that one's not there. What do? You wait for it to spawn. Because what's going to happen is if you just keep running after it, right, then what you're really doing is you're slowly catching up to whoever is grinding it in front of you. But if you wait, right, and let it spawn, then you can find a timing where it continuously spawns as you arrive, right, giving you the highest chance. This is particularly important if you're playing in rush hour when everyone is farming. Instead of just running from one place to another, you can go to a really remote place, right, to farm a little bit here or there, but if you stick to these sort of main areas of farming, then it's way better to just find a good timing. Wait for one piece to spawn fully, and then start the rotation. I think that's pretty much all you need to know in regards to actually grinding the materials to level up armoring. So you get 200 armoring, then what? What's the end game? Well, armoring works really, really well with a couple of other professions. Smelting, weaving, and leatherworking. These all work in unison with armoring. Now, of course, there are 2 places you can do armor, outfitting station and the forge. In my example here, I was using the outfitting station because for leveling up, you don't want to go for the plate armor because it's way more resource heavy. It costs roughly the same resources, in fact, I believe exactly the same resources, but in metal instead of in leather, right? So that's way more expensive, way more contested, way harder to get. It's way cheaper to do it in leather. Also, getting smelting accumulation gear is nigh impossible. I've never even seen a piece. I know it exists, but I've never even seen it. That's how rare that is. So again, there's also weaving sets. They're slightly more expensive than the leather set, but they're obtainable. Well, once you're 200, there's a couple of different things I would suggest that you do. Step 1. Make announcements about crafting people's voidbend gear. Okay, not everyone has access to a 200 armor. They really don't. And not everyone trusts people, because crafting voidbend gear means giving them your very expensive materials, right? I remember this dude I had to, like, who needed an armor, like it was 3 o'clock in the night. I was like, yeah, I can help you, voidbend. And there's a bug right now where when you craft a piece of voidbend gear, you can't trade it until you've relogged, right? And he didn't know that, so I was like, dude, I swear I'm gonna come back. I promise I'm gonna come back, okay? And he seemed a little bit nervous. Understandably so. I don't blame him for being a little bit on edge. Also, I completely forgot to put my camera here as I was recording. God damn it, I am a moron. Apologies. But so what you want to do is you want to make those announcements, right? And then you want to charge, I'd say if you're a nice guy, charge 350 gold. If you want to make some decent cash, all the way up to 1,000 gold, I'd say is not unreasonable to someone, because you have poured in, at this point, even if with low crafting fees, you've poured in thousands, okay, thousands, tens of thousands probably. If you account for material values, if you account for refining materials, if you account for, you know, just putting in materials that you don't take back out, right? And that is the part where we're going to be using our 200 armoring skills. Again, you can probably charge anything from 250 to 1,000 gold for crafting voidbend gear. Now, voidbend cannot be seen unless you have an ingot on you. As you can see, despite the fact that I have a full set here, I can't actually see the recipe unless I have an active voidbend ingot on me. But it's super easy. Once, like, if the person has the materials, you literally just click a button, pay like a few gold, and boom, it's crafted, right? So crafting voidbend for people is the easiest money-making thing you can do once you reach 200 armoring. But of course, that's not everything, right? Because then there's crafting 600 gear score gear, like the normal gear, the non-named gear. Which can also roll as a legendary if you get it all the way to 600, put in all the Azoth. So how does that work? Well, if you take a tier 5 thing, it can be anything. It could be this coarse leather hat, or it could be this Shade Walker set, which is pretty cool. Now, if we put in tier 5 basic materials from top to bottom, let's see here, right, 500 to 525. That's our baseline. Then put in Asmodeum plus 15, Runic Leather plus 15, Phoenix Weave plus 15. You eat Spicy Cabbage Soup plus 15 again, right? So that's a total of plus 60 so far. Then you equip a full set of armoring gear. You get 5 from a necklace, and you get 10 from the gear. The gear can be quite expensive. Some of the pieces are cheap, some of them are expensive. See a piece like this, armoring expertise, right? So here I have a couple armor mastery, plus 5. This one is cheap, super easy to get. The chest piece can be a bit expensive. It varies a bit from piece to piece. We also have here the armor gloves, right? But you need a full set of that. That's another 15 that we can add there. You can also get all the way up to plus 15 from your trophies, right? Which is the next thing. Now, I have 3 minor trophies. I haven't upgraded mine yet. But to do so, you'll need Armorer's Journals, which are almost non-existent at the moment. They get bought up immediately at way overinflated prices. Armor. See, they simply do not exist at the moment on the server. And then, of course, after that, you need precision armoring tools, which is, I assume, even more rare and even more expensive. I've only seen one Armorer's Journal. I only know one person that actually had it drop. And he sold it for like 6,000, and that was dirt cheap, actually. I thought it was expensive, but it was actually dirt cheap at the moment. I think you can probably sell it for 10 or 15,000 an Armorer's Journal. But the important part is just that you get your 3 basic trophies. So get those 3. That's a plus 9 score, guaranteed. And so you're getting into the realm there of a near guaranteed legendary. I'm not sure, actually, because I haven't actually tried to combine all of them yet. I'm planning to do that later today. But I've heard that it can only go to 595 to 600 in practice. that you can't get it 600 to 600, but I'm not sure, because I feel like I've seen that happen with other crafting professions, so I'm not 100% on that. I should have probably checked that, apologies. But but that's how you make legendary gear that isn't named in the first place. Of course, you put in a mod and it rolls something, right? And it's a lot of work. You need to remember to eat the food, put up the trophies, but it can be done. And then of course the final little trick you can use is if you open your bio, then you can check for the different towns and see if one of them has Armor's Inspiration, which is a passive buff that's going to last here for 3 days or 60 hours. That gives another boost to the minimum, or is it the maximum? I think it's to the maximum actually, to the maximum gear score. I don't believe this affects the minimum. I think it's the maximum, because as far as I could see, the minimum was still at a flat 500 when we started out. So yeah, that's pretty much it. The only other thing I really have to add is that if you're low on materials, you can substitute some of the less important materials, right? So Rawhide, for example, throw it in. It's not really worth that much, doesn't sell that well. Same with Scaly Hide. Whatever you do, do not put in like expensive furs. Do not put in Cinnabar unless you, or Tolvium, unless you're actually going to use the piece. You can put in Azurite chunks just fine if you want. Fey Iron, I didn't know what it was for in the beginning, so I have like 400 Fey Iron. Now I have nothing to use it for. I don't know what to use it for. Probably use it for a different profession as a stand-in material. That's really what the lower tiers of these rare drops are for. They don't really have many other uses at the moment. There may be some specific recipes that need or require them. I know there is with fur, right? For example, you need some of the fur to craft the void bend, but in a lot of cases using Fey Iron is just fine as a substitute if you don't have any iron and you really want to level it up a little bit more, or you have storage issues, who knows. Then the final tip I believe I can give you is when you're crafting all of these gloves, first of all, salvage anything white immediately. Next thing, as far as the green goes, look through them very quickly, right? Anything that has mining luck, harvesting luck, logging luck, skinning luck, right? Any of those, and possibly even just the normal luck one, depending on the rest of the piece, those I would either keep if they're higher than your current one. Otherwise, I would probably bother selling them for just like 50 gold a piece. That's worth it. Depending on, of course, what the entries are on your server. But other than that, just look for those luck pieces, sell those, salvage everything else, put it back into the crafting so that you can craft more and more and sort of accumulate it up. So that's the only way you're going to effectively craft all of these like 2,000 pairs of gloves that you need in total. 989 of the tier 5 version to get to 200. And then you want to start accumulating your gear, your food, your buffs, all of these things until hopefully eventually you can craft some neat legendaries, sell them on the auction house or equip them, and that's pretty much armoring for you. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, please like, a comment, and a subscribe for more New World content. We're gonna have a bunch of more guides. As you guys can see, I have done a lot of crafting, and I like to do proper research. I like to really make sure that what I'm saying is accurate. That doesn't mean it's perfect, doesn't mean I'm sure that I missed something, right? I'm sure that I missed something. But other than that, I just hope you guys enjoyed the video. And as always, I love you guys. Stay awesome. Peace out, motherfuckers.